All right, welcome everyone. This is the Cyber Triage 3.10 release webinar. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff today that was in the latest release. Hopefully you'll learn some new things in general and about Cyber Triage in particular, but also some new things about domain controllers or ImpHash or things as well that you didn't know about. We'll give another couple minutes here, a minute or so, to let other folks trickle in here. All right, that's a minute. So let's get started. So I'm Brian Carrier. I'm on here as Cyber Triage. We were trying to get the name changed before this, but it didn't work. So anyway, I'm Brian Carrier. I'm going to do a bunch of this. Mike is also here. He's going to jump in towards the end, talk about some Linux things. But the main goal here is basically talking about what's in there, what's in the release that came out last week. Give you some background. It's a lot of the same stuff that's in the blog post, honestly, just more of a seeing it in person and being able to ask questions. So everyone's muted on the webinar, just kind of like as usual. There is a chat section and a Q&A section. Feel free to use either of kind of chat through them. We were talking about using the Discord channel we've been setting up for webinars. We can get that set up yet, but you can use the basic chat feature here if you want to, or ask questions here. And Mike and I will be checking in there to answer them as we go through. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in there and we will address them as they come up. So today's gonna be mostly about slides, demos actually. Usually we kind of go back and forth in these, whether they're slides, demos. Today's very much of a demo focused thing. So the main goal of these, as usual, is to kind of provide an overview of the key features, give some background on some of them. There's a lot in this release we're gonna see in a bit. So the things we're gonna talk about today, the sections are domain control authentications, ImpHash, labels, a UI change, Azure uploads, installer changes, team access control, Linux, and then whatever else we want for a Q&A at the end. So before we begin, this is for the current customers. There are some people on this call, I think, who are not current customers. A bunch are. If you are a current customer, you should have gotten some emails over the past month or two about signing up for the training bundle. This gives you lots of access to Mike here for the basics course and other kinds of things. So if you haven't signed up for it and you can't find the email, all you gotta do is go to cybertriage.com/training. Here, let's jump out of here. I think I have it up here already. That brings you to this page, upper right-hand corner, Cyber Triage training bundle. Press on this, sign up here, enter your info. Use the email address of your company email associated with your license, and then magic should happen and you will automatically get enrolled with the training bundle. If it doesn't mismatch, then Mike has to get involved or supposed to get involved to kind of verify things. So if you aren't a customer, please don't try and go through this because you're just gonna add a queue to Mike's list, for that to verify. But otherwise, if you're a customer, please enroll in this. You get access to the basics course and a bunch of other data sets and things for some of our future webinars and other kind of content. So that's that. Second topic, just make sure everyone kind of knows some of the basics when we aren't in this environment here. The online user manual at docs.cybertriage.com has a history section, and that has all of the other updates. So there's a bunch of stuff we're actually not going to cover today. There's a lot in this release. There was many months since our last release. I think it was in December was the last major release. This is longer than we usually go, which means there's a lot more stuff in there. So you can scroll through here. We're gonna hit the highlights of a bunch of these kind of key things here on the top part today. Bunch we aren't, and there's a whole lot of other stuff like different kinds of things that we're doing, here for artifacts and this and that, and parsing this and doing that, whatever, that aren't covered here. But you can see some of those things on here if you ever dive into that. So that's just kind of the basic housekeeping, if you will. So let's get into feature number one that we're going to discuss today. So domain controller authentications, right? So domain controllers are an important part of a Windows, system. I'm sure everyone knows this, right? They're involved with helping to authenticate users and computers. And so when people are logging into places, oftentimes if they're on the network, the domain controller gets involved to, kind of validate passwords and credentials, and whether it's Kerberos or NTLM or all that kind of stuff. I'm sure we will have content in the next couple of months diving much deeper into domain controllers than we are today. But the basic idea is that domain controllers are important for investigations, intrusions, right? Because they can give you a lot of insight in terms of what's happening in the network. If you know a user account's been compromised, the domain controller is a quick place to go to see where else they logged into. Maybe you've got a SIM that has this information, maybe you don't. But certainly if you don't, this is an easy place, or if you can't get access to the SIM very easily, but you can get access to the domain controller, the event logs on there can provide a lot of helpful information for them. So we still have a bunch of customers who the domain controller is, one of the top 5 computers that they will grab as part of, a collection. They start off with a handful of computers that they know are compromised or highly suspected of, and they also grab the domain controller. And the reason for that is that can give them kind of the next 5, 6, 10 computers to go into to collect from once they've realized what users and accounts are involved and what's going on. That provides that movement. So you can always bring in a domain controller in a cyber triage. That's not new. What's new in the 310 is actually focusing on some of the event logs that are unique to domain controllers, focusing on authentications. So there's additional parsing going on for domain controllers now for authentications, and there's a new UI in there that allows you to focus on that. So I'm going to exit the slide deck and go into cyber triage. This is kind of like a cooking show today, where we've got a whole bunch of stuff already pre-ingested. So DC is the host that we've added in here. It's domain controller. There's a new button down here, domain controller authentications. This is new in 310. It's always enabled, but you may not see data here unless you actually have a domain controller added with authentication information on there. So we're gonna press on that. What this is now showing you is all of the authentications that we're seeing on that domain controller. So this is showing you the users that did authentications, when the last authentication was. By default, we're focusing on the last 30 days on the theory here that you're investigating somewhat recently, and you're looking for, you care more about what happened in the past 30 days versus a year or 2 years if your domain controller goes back that far. Get information about how many authentication attempts there were, how many sources there were of authentications, right? So how many computers they came from, and how many destinations. Sources can get a bit, interesting here, depending on, how much DHCP is involved in VPNs and all that kind of stuff. Destinations is kind of more interesting, honestly, right? In terms of actually, if someone had compromised credentials and using that account to go into 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 computers, these numbers can get pretty high over here. So what you can do, you can kind of jump in here and quickly sort by number of destinations and kind of go through these things, right? So we see there's an admin account. That's maybe normal, right, to be going to a bunch of computers here, some others here, there's a bunch of 5s and 4s. Nothing really jumping out as being an obvious kind of a big number here, but in some ways, sometimes you may have, some account that, did some, PowerShell remote or some WinRM things on a lot of systems, like in a ransomware case, did a lot of copying around. This number could be quite high, right, depending on how many places that they jumped into. You'll see this Carolyn account over here has got a exclamation point next to it. It got flagged as being suspicious. That's our usual icon for suspiciousness. You can see here that it's an account compromised suspected. Is a brute force password guessing attack in this time range. Spoiler alert, it's actually bigger than 30 days in this case here, so we can broaden this out if we want to at that point and kind of expand that out. And we can now see here that Carolyn actually jumped out the top here as being, much more than the others. Now that we go backwards to 30 to 60 days, you can expand Carolyn out and then see all of the authentications attempts that Carolyn has, both kind of where, what user count, where they're coming from, where they're going to. We can scroll through here and see the failed successes. We may not have these computers yet, right? We're seeing computers here called computer 16, 24, etc. We can do things here like sort to group on number of accounts or computers and whatever. But basically here, by just focusing on domain controller, we can start seeing that the Carolyn account's kind of suspicious. We should, and the following computers are also suspicious. And then if we haven't collected from them, start bringing them in, for that analysis. So the basic idea of what's in this release is this new UI that allows you to kind of just focus on user accounts from that kind of domain perspective, what hosts they logged into, some basic time range, and then a whole bunch of other kind of heuristics and scoring, around these things, both in terms of, spray attacks, brute force attacks, Kerber roasting, et cetera, and things that you may see from the domain controller. So I think there's another account on here. Is it this one? Yeah, this May account here. This is basically one of the Kerberos attacks, right? If there's kind of a ticket granting ticket that was produced for an account with pre-auth, which may mean that this could be, some form of a Kerberos attack, on there or not. You should take a look at this. So we'll dive more into it. I mean, we have an hour. We have a lot of things to cover. I don't want to spend too much more on this. We'll certainly dive more into this in the future. But this is the basic idea of if you have a domain controller, now come in here, get that bigger picture view of what's going on. All right, plug your questions away in the Q&A section if you have them. Let me be good here and actually check. There are none. All right. So theme number 2 in the release, ImpHash fuzzy hashing. So basic scenario here, right? So for those who don't know what ImpHash is, right? So in Cyber Triage, here I'm just gonna navigate to what I'm talking about here. In Cyber Triage, when you add in a host of some sort, I'll just make up some data here so we can proceed on. You're prompted with what you want to do with the data coming in from your collection. And one option here is to query using MD5 SHA-256 hash to know if that file's already been seen and analyzed. And if it has, get results back and good, bad, suspicious, whatever. There's always an option down here on what to do if the file hasn't been seen before by us or Reversing Labs. And historically, the options were upload the server for analysis or just mark it as suspicious. We have a new option now, which is query ImpHash. So some folks don't want to upload the file for whatever reasons. And then they were left with just a bunch of files that were kind of unknown. They could be unknown because they're new. They could be unknown because they were, a unique piece of malware that had been tailored towards them. Hard to know. So ImpHash is a cool approach. It's from the Mandiant folks, I think by like 10 years ago, I think. What it does is it takes the import table from executable. So an executable has structure to it. The import table is one part of that structure that maps out the DLLs that are going to be brought in that program depends on. So it takes the list of imports, I think it sorts them and normalizes them, and then takes the hash of that. And the theory is that it's very easy for an attacker to change, a couple of useless bits or bytes in the file and change the hash value without changing the functionality. It's a bit harder for them to change the import table and without changing the behavior of that. So that's the basic idea of this. So the ImpHash is a kind of a fuzzy hash of an executable. A whole lot of files could have collisions with this. That's kind of the idea. But the idea is that if you don't want to upload the file, you can at least query the ImpHash and see these other files that have been analyzed that have the same import table, and you can see if they've been good or bad or been flagged as good or bad in the past or not. So that's the new feature. That's how you use it. You basically say, if you were a shop before that said, hey, I'm turning this guy off and going down here, you can now click this one to query ImpHash to actually have that option to do this fuzzy matching on there. At that point, it's the same background process. What goes on though is that if you have query ImpHash enabled instead, what's going to do is get the ImpHash of those unknown files. It's going to balance that off Reversing Labs. Reversing Labs is going to come back with maybe a set of SHA-256 or MD5 hashes of files that have that same ImpHash. And then we go back and start querying those to see, all right, what's known about those? What percentage of them were bad? What were good, etc. So the end result is, I'm going to go back to the cooking show approach here and go to this host 2. this has a file that had an unknown hash and we did not upload it. And we said ran the ImpHash on that. So it's this guy here. I'm gonna jump you right to it. So we know here this one file got flagged as being suspicious because 108 hashes were identified as malicious out of 109. So what this means is that the ImpHash for this file, which you can scroll down now and there's a new line here that says ImpHash. This is the ImpHash for that file. That Reversing Labs has 109 records of executables files. They have the content for files with that ImpHash, and 108 of them came back as being malicious when they did the scanning. So this then gets marked as well as being suspicious. We don't mark files as being bad based off ImpHash because this is a fuzzy metric, right? It's not necessarily guaranteed that just because one was bad that the rest of them are. So these ImpHashes will get flagged as being suspicious for you then to kind of make the call on, is this interesting or not? There will obviously be files where all of the ImpHash results come back as clean. In that case, they won't get flagged as being suspicious. If you do want to learn more, you say, well, maybe 108 out of 109 is a real clear call. Other ways it may be more vague, right? It could be 20 out of 100. What you can do now is you can go to the File tab. You can go to Similar Files, right? So the sub-tabs here, there's now Similar Files ImpHash. And this basically gives you a breakdown on all of the threat names that are associated with those 108. And here's a bunch of the first 50 SHA hashes of the ones that came back. And you can then take these hash values and look into them with some of the resource or whatever if you want to get some more ideas on what you may be dealing with with this file. And you can decide whether you want to actually upload it for a more authoritative answer, use your own sandbox, you can do whatever. The other way the ImpHash is being used, and I didn't actually cook this into the demo, so I'm not sure this is going to work or not, is the Other Occurrences tab. I'm gonna rely here on the, like I said, I didn't prepare for this enough actually, but the Other Occurrences tab, as you guys all know, probably our users, this will tell you where else the item has been seen. Some are with exact match, some are with partial matches. So historically for a file, an exact match was the same hash value and a partial match was the same like file path or something else more fuzzy that may be different content. So now for files, the partial match will also include ImpHash. So this is files added as of 3.10. So if you add a file a year ago with 3.7, this won't work. But for anything moving forward, we will be saving the ImpHash within your correlation database, and you'll get those matches there as well. So that is it for ImpHash. If you have questions, let me know. Topic 3, labels. So new feature in here. So scoring is still our main way of identifying what's interesting and relevant for the investigation, right? So bad and suspicious are still the ideas here on, like, we want you to kind of focus on putting the things into bad that are bad, looking at suspicious and identifying them as either being good or bad or kind of unknown. But there's value of labels, right? And historically, some people use labels to kind of do this equivalent. We had introduced labels, but our main motivation for labels is really kind of talking about allowing you to kind of tag why something is interesting and why it's bad or suspicious, or anything else, right? They're very generic, most like most tools labeling infrastructure. So what you can do is you can right-click on an item, whether it's scored or not. But the assumption is that it's going to be mostly on items that have a score, and you can say add label. In this case, I've already made a label called initial access, and so you can right-click on it and you can say initial access if this is where you think the artifact that represents the initial access. So that's what you want to label by in terms of like the why it's interesting. And you can see here in the column now there's initial access being shown there. If you want to make your own labels, out of the box, that right-click option actually isn't there because there aren't labels in there yet. The next release, we may add something in there to make it from the right-click option. But in 3.10, you go to the options area, you go to custom labels, and you can make a new label here. So you can do, backdoor, if you want to as another label. and add that in, and then you can start labeling other things, with that as the label. So that's kind of the concept here. Again, you can do anything you want to. So I'm just going to pick a random thing here and go to logons and flag something here that we can also just kind of add a label here, even though it's not scored yet. You can do labels for that as well. So one of the use cases we were discussing with some of our users, was being able to just kind of label something as like, hey, you may want to change this configuration in the future. We noticed that this was kind of running and probably shouldn't be. It didn't need to be, but it wasn't part of the attack, right? But you want to kind of record that for future reference. You could add a label like, follow up on, or kind of, remind them to fix this, or whatever as you're going through investigation. So where to see label items? So now in the bottom left-hand corner, down at the bottom here, there's a labeled items section here. This allows you to see all the things you've labeled. You can choose these. You can select, unselect some of these if you want to, and you can see items in here and kind of focus on that. With that, the other way labels are shown is in a new report. So there's a new report, an Excel report here. So if you go to report, you can see bad, suspicious, and labeled items in Excel. You can hit go on that, and this has a lot of the same data as the HTML report has. It's just honestly easier to copy and paste to make your own reports. So this new Excel report has tabs on the bottom. There's one tab for all bad, suspicious, and labeled merged together. There's also tabs for the different artifact types like users, logons, web artifacts. The things that are in here are the bad, suspicious, and labeled items on here. So the basic idea here is anything you scored or labeled, for the things that kind of weren't bad, kind of weren't related, but you want to call out, they'll get included here as well. And then if you're making, an Office document or Google Doc for your reports, you can then kind of copy and paste and resort and do whatever in here to get that into your reporting format. So there's been a lot of discussions lately on reporting and helping you all out to make your reports easier to make and have as much data as you need to for that. There's a question here. Let me pull that up. This question here, that's an excellent question. Thank you for bringing that up. I meant to do that as I was talking. I was like, I'm gonna bring this up at the end, and I forgot to. Question here was on ImpHashes for licensing. So the current version in 3.10, we're treating ImpHash the same as a file lookup. So with your licensing right now, you've got hash lookups. Sorry, I rephrase it. Right now you have hash queries and you have file uploads. We're treating ImpHash the same as the file upload because you're kind of toggling between the two. And it's a similar kind of, honestly, cost model with us and Reversing Labs, which was kind of our whole goal here is we're kind of bundling up their packages for you all to take advantage of. So right now, the idea is that you get one upload, credit being docked for every ImpHash query. Now, this may change. And the reason it may change is, in reality, what we have to do with Reversing Labs is actually do that one ImpHash query and then maybe cycle through 100 or so files on there to see if they are known or not. And we want to be fair to everyone, all of our customers, and kind of what's in there or not. And so there's been discussion, and what we want to do is kind of see what happens with 3.10 and our users and the data that we're seeing here to figure out if we have to kind of, figure something else out with how many queries that we actually have to be doing as part of that. But 3.10, the easy answer is each ImpHash query is the same as a file upload. That may change, moving forward as we kind of see the results. There are some ImpHashes that have crazy results, and you can look online and see other folks seeing this. But there's like some .NET things and whatever that there's thousands of files that come back with that. So we're working on kind of making sure we have approaches to deal with these crazy numbers where if it's 1,000, we're going to look at all of them, but making sure we get some good coverage there to see if we think that any of them are bad or not. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, next topic here, UI. So this is a minor one, but there's always been some level of confusion around this left-hand side and how we organize things. So, for those who haven't gone through the divide and conquer course that we did, These things are based off of like the questions around like, looking at computer compromises is really about looking at, are there accounts that are compromised and accounts been taken over and suspicious user activity? Is there suspicious process activity around malware? Because malicious processes, malicious things that are running, and where they're kind of compromised, kind of OS configuration settings that were changed. This used to be headed malware, just because the theme is that all of this stuff was around malware related things, right? Persistence of malware, running malware, malware beaconing back and forth, malware, backdoor list waiting for connections, etc. So this was headed malware. This caused confusion though, because people are like, I didn't find any malware down there. Or does that mean all of these things are actually malware? So we just kind of did a simple change here. This is now process, right? So this is now actually set up where this is all things around user accounts and account takeover. These are all things around processes that you should be looking at. These are all things around OS configuration, things you're looking at. Core stuff isn't the same, just headed up as process, which again, if you're kind of an OS internals, systems, computer kind of person, this makes sense, right? Computers really run processes, right? It's kind of a core part of that. So that's just kind of a minor change. The one kind of minor, kind of slight, weird thing is that the heading is process, and then processes is the listing of current and past processes that we're running. But that's kind of the minor nuance there between those two headings. So you'll see that change both here as well as in the collection tools. And when you start collections off, that heading has now been changed. All right, what else can we talk about? Let's talk about Azure. So we have a collector, right? We have a CyberTriage collector. It pulls a bunch of data, off a live running system. Does a lot of cool stuff. You can always get it from this upper right-hand corner called Extract Collector. Historically, the options have been save the results to a file, save the results back to a CyberTriage server, or upload to S3. And you can now upload to an Azure blob, or to Azure cloud storage. So if you're an Azure shop and have been asking for that, which a bunch of you have, you can now click on Azure blob, and you can plug in your account name, an account key, and an optional container name. And this will then store that into a configuration file, so that when you hit extract, that will be saved in the same folder as the configuration file, and the collection tool can then run that and use that to upload the data. So for those who've never seen the mechanics of that, it basically works by the collector will still locally write all the data. So it locally makes that file, and then once it's done, it does kind of a put operation, up into that blob. So it saves out locally. Once it's done, it then uploads it to Azure, and then gets rid of the local copy, and goes away. So same process as S3. S3 just has different options because there's other providers of S3 besides AWS. Azure seems to be the only provider of blobs, or at least storage blobs. And but so basic same structure there. We'll put name, put a key, put a container name in. Otherwise, it'll make one with like CyberTriage in there somewhere, and it'll go. So that's that. What else am I missing here? Installer. Okay, so important thing. Historically, CyberTriage has kind of took the, we straddle two worlds in CyberTriage. We kind of cater to a bunch of kind of traditional forensics shops, law enforcement, whatever, who are very used to kind of being able to open up a version of software from 2 years ago to reopen that case that they kind of want to load their memory and kind of keep all versions, while also looking more kind of SOCs and other kind of things that basically just want like SaaS auto update, not really even deal with updates and upgrades, and just kind of have stuff moving all the time, right? And are comfortable with that without having to go back. So historically, CyberTriage had a model where every time you installed, it would put you in a new folder, right? So CyberTriage 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, and you had to manually uninstall the old version. Starting 3.10, that's changed. Starting 3.10, it now goes into a CyberTriage folder. And when you install 3.11, it's going to uninstall 3.10 and put it in the same location. So for those of you who are just kind of desktop users, standard pro, this basically means you don't have to go back and do a manual uninstall if you want to get rid of the old versions. If you are the person who wants to have the 2-year-old copy lying around, sorry, you're going to have to kind of do some more installing, uninstalling, for that. But that seems to be rare amongst most of our users at this point. The bigger impact, though, is actually the benefit is for our team users. So if you are a team user running Cyber Triage as a service, the benefit now is that once you do it at 3.11, it really kicks in the next release. You won't have to update this service because the program will be at the same path as it was before. So if you have Cyber Triage server running as a service, it is now always going to be the same path, and you don't have to remember to update the service. And that's been kind of a common source of issues in the past. If people upgrade, forget to update the service, and the old version keeps on getting launched every time after that. So that will no longer be an issue starting in 3.11. Right. So this was the setting the stage, for that in the next release. So you will have to uninstall 3.9 if you're once you already installed 3.10. All right, that's that one. One more, and then I'm going to pass it over to Mike here. So if you have other questions I would have talked about, plug them in here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Mike. So one other kind of small thing here is, well, small to talk about, potentially big for rollouts here. So starting in 3.10, Cyber Triage team now requires user accounts for the clients. All right, so in past releases, there was a kind of a secret token, secret key, API key that the clients would use, and they would all use the same one. Basically, all clients needed to know kind of the Cyber Triage server key. Starting at 3.10, there's now a different key per user that gets created, and logins and passwords and all that kind of stuff. So we're setting the infrastructure up for more of this kind of collaboration, access control, kinds of things that this user can see this case, but not that case, and things. So this was kind of step one, of that. So in 3.10, if you just kind of blindly install the server and blindly install the clients, they're going to get an authentication error because they're going to try and reuse that older key that no longer works. So in the user manual, I'm going to go back to this. There is a section here on upgrading installations. And there is a special section now here on upgrading team from before 3.10 to 3.10 or later in section 13.2. So this process basically goes through that, which is this section here goes to create and manage team users and maps out how to create users on there. This release is setting ourselves up for another future direction, which is having a web app for the server configuration. So there is a new web app that runs this interface here where you're making user accounts into. As releases go on, this is going to become the dominant way for configuring the server versus kind of more of the current options panel, which I know a lot of you are keenly interested in as well, to make it easier to make changes onto the server. So that's all things in the work that are coming. If you have questions with that, feel free to reach out to support. We can guide you through, but there's a bunch of steps here to kind of go through all these things. There's different kinds of accounts. There's read-only accounts, there's read-write accounts, passwords, API keys, etc. All right, with that, last chance, not really your last chance, but last easy chance to ask some questions here before I pass this off to Mike to talk about Linux. Feel good? All right, quiet bunch here today. All right, so let me see if this is going to work here. So I'm going to change presenter. I'm going to, ooh, I have everybody on here to change to. This is far more people than I thought I was going to. All right, here we go. So I'm going to pass over to you, Mike. I think you get to pick how much you want to share.
There we go. Thank you, Brian. Hopefully my screen is getting shared now.
It is.
It is, fantastic. And hopefully it's the right screen with Cyber Triage on it and not the other one with the everything else happening. Okay, so we now support Linux, which is super exciting. One of the challenges with Linux is that whilst technically it's one operating system, there's lots and lots of variants going on with it from multiple different file systems that you can support through to a huge range of different configuration options. So the way we're supporting Linux is through the Unix artifact collector, or Unix-like artifact collector, which is an open source. It's even written in front of me. I didn't have to try and remember that acronym. It is an open source collector with a bunch of different configuration options. We have set up Cyber Triage to sort of use the default full collection, which honestly, even on a fairly large system, is still pretty compact. So adding a collection is pretty much as simple as giving it your host display name and then browsing to the directory where your UAC file has been unpacked to. And so when you run your UAC collection, it just creates a tar gzip file to load that in. You just have to unpack that into your, in my case, I put it in my exhibits directory in my case file, and then click that load UAC file, and it gets loaded in. And again, I will take you to one I prepared earlier. The other interesting thing with Linux is we get really two different flavors. You have your server version, and then you have desktops and workstations. So obviously you're going to see slightly different artifacts and things available on each of those. And what we've done within Cyber Triage is sort of go through and try and accommodate both of those different uses and those different groups. So starting off with bad items, when you're running that collection, you will be collecting hashes, or if you're doing a standard full collection with UAC, you will be getting a body file, so you're going to get all the details about the file system. It will collect key log files, it'll collect key user files, including contents of the home directory, or special contents, I guess, from the home directory, like your web browser history. So you can go in and view browser history just as you would on a Windows system. And it will also get hashes of all those files, which we are then loading up to reversing labs as we would with a Windows system. And you get to go through and run those detections and get alerted for malware on the system. We do have some other heuristics going in there as well. So this example here, it's been identified as malicious. It is actually, this one is a coin miner. So again, hash detected, it's bad, it gets scored as bad, identified as malicious. Some of the other heuristics, one technique we see, for example, process gets kicked off, process is running, it's active on the system, that source file or the actual binary file in the file system may get deleted. Things are just running in the background, makes it a little harder to detect. If things like that are seen during the collection process, we're then correlating what processes are running, what we see on the disk, and we'll let you know about it if we see that activity happening there. Other things we do, and running a course on Linux forensics is something that would take a lot more than time we have available today, but really quick overview of what we do, primarily what you can see within Cyber Triage. You can see accounts on the system. Now, important to note here, with accounts, as with Windows, we look at, or you can see real accounts and also non-existent accounts. So we can choose, and you've got your filtering options there, displaying what type of accounts that you get to see. For example, if you're on a system that has been exposed to the internet, you're going to see a lot of failed logons. Those account details will actually be recorded. So when you go to inbound logons, which I'll move on to now, you can go through, and if we want to have a look at our logon sessions, we can see that there are a lot of failed logons here. Gives us an idea, this system has been attacked. Threat actors have been trying to get into them. Obviously, we can go through and filter those out. And now we only see users that actually exist on the system and have been able to successfully log on. So again, you've got all that information available to you. And obviously, if you're seeing a lot of failed logons, you're potentially seeing source hosts there that are malicious. They may be going back into your threat intelligence system. You may be wanting to see, does that failed logons, those source hosts, those IP addresses correlate to malicious browser activity or something else? Are you seeing them on other hosts and so on? So, those IPs become IOCs that you may want to look at in the future. If you're just interested in activity on the host, you can filter all that out and target in on, yep, these are the users that actually have been doing stuff on the system successfully. In terms of web artifacts, we're actually looking at a server here. I've got another system there that has web artifacts, so I'll jump back to that later on. But server system, generally you don't have a web browser running on, so you're not going to see so much there. In terms of triggered tasks, we also pull those up and basically primarily looking at your cron jobs. And again, triggered tasks are always, if you compromise the system, you need to be looking for that persistence mechanism. How can you remain persistent on that host and see what's going on? As always, we do processes. And once again, you may want to filter out what's scored as good if you want to see everything that's happening on the system, or you just care about the stuff that may be unknown or scored as bad. And exactly as you would with Windows, you can dive into these processes and get that additional information about what has actually been running on the system. Same goes for active connections. What services are running on the system. We mentioned here, we know this one's a coin miner, and we can see it's connecting out to its C2 server, and SSH or SSH daemon is running as well as active connections, and the same information with listening ports as well. Again, pretty straightforward. It's the exact same concepts here on a Linux system as you would see on a Windows system anyway. So there's not a lot of mastery required at this point to start getting your head around those things. The file listing is pulled from the body file, exactly as it would be on a Windows system, once again. So you can go through and browse that file system. And we are also obviously getting the body file. We're getting all those time stamps. So we can also go to the timeline and see everything organized along that timeline as you go on. One other sort of piece of information in terms of collection details, again, go through and check, see where you're pulling that information from. And you are still getting the summary of everything that has been collected on the system, and still the ability to export those source files as well if you need to. The other one we can have a quick look at, this is kind of cheating a little bit. This is a Kali system that I did use to compromise another host in a demo. So you can see a lot more bad items on this one. Kali system from the outset, it's going to be used for malicious activity, so we expect to see a lot of bad stuff there. And here you can just see some of that web activity that's being pulled from the user account, and exactly as you would see with a Windows system. I mean, the nice thing here is the browsers that are running on Linux are basically using the same history databases as they do on a Windows system anyway. So it's not too much work for us to come in and adapt to that and include that information. So super quick overview there of our Linux support. I'm happy to take any questions or pass it back to you, Brian.
Excellent. Thank you very much here. Let me oh, that's right. I'm under cyber triage, so I can't see myself. All right, so that's the end of what we officially had. There's a few questions that did kind of trickle in here, so I can go through those, but you can chip away at others, if you will, as you're kind of digesting what Mike was talking about with Linux. So one question was around the domain controller authentications and kind of where else you'll see that information, right? So I showed you the interface before that was like that new incident level domain controller authentication view. You won't see a difference once you go, if you open the domain controller up, those authentications aren't really shown there. Those are still going to be primarily the kind of logins into the domain controller itself versus kind of the authentications it's observing. But the plan, and this will not be a 3.11, but the ultimate plan here is that we actually merge all of this stuff together, so that if the domain controller has data the host doesn't, you can still see it when you're on the host, right? And vice versa. But we aren't quite there yet. There's a lot of complications with IP addresses and host name resolving and user account merging and SIDs and all this other kind of stuff. So right now there is kind of a different view, just as kind of a full disclosure here, that if you tag a user account in the host, it won't get or scored. If you score in the host, you may not see that scoring at the incident level. They're treated separately, but we're working on that. We'll get there through. The main goal here is just kind of give you that visibility to kind of know what users and hosts to look at, and we'll work on kind of the plumbing between all these views as we kind of go along. So that was one question on just kind of clarifying that. Second one was asking about Azure and starting collections after the upload. This has been a request that we've had in the past for S3, so it makes sense. It's now coming up as an Azure question. Right now, out of the box, there isn't kind of the Lambda equivalent for that, but we actually have people working on that right now. And our goal here is that we're mapping out how to do that, so that you can have data get uploaded to S3 or Azure, and then automatically have the server kick off and start processing that and analyzing that. So I would say expect some content here in the next, I'm just going to say month or so, on how to do that and how to wire that up. So we're certainly also going in that direction as well, which some of you have been waiting for. And then the last kind of question here was around Azure and the deployer script. So for those who may know, we have this deployer script that allows you to integrate the collector with your EDR. It's a PowerShell script. You can run it on, Defender, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, whatever. So the question here was around Azure. So the script that's currently out there that we have not released yet should work, even though a bunch of the environment variables and all that kind of stuff are very S3 focused. You should be able to kind of get it to work. It may require some changes. There's a new version of that script coming out that we haven't pushed out yet that does kind of dive into that a bit more. There are some changes that the configuration file changed and things, but that deployer script, will work with the Azure as well. So if you all have EDRs and are looking to integrate Cyber Triage with that, there's a bunch of content on our website. You can reach out to support. We can send you in the right direction here, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible to get those collections happening quickly, based off of an EDR alert and things out there. So let us know if you need help with the EDR integration side as well. All right, final poke of the questions here. I don't see any others. So with that, thanks all for joining. Send email if you have questions or other kind of burning feature requests that are really troubling you, or even not really troubling you, but to make sure we're aware of them. We always have a sort of list of things that we're working on. So if you already submitted them, hopefully we're getting them soon. And if we don't know about them, then please let us know. But with that, thanks for your time today, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thanks.
Thank you.